So as a runner and just an athlete in general, I've always been told like, oh, you need to have carbohydrates, you need to have sugar if you want to, perform well or just have energy in general. Like you need sugar, you need carbohydrates, you need these things. But for the past 9 months, I haven't eaten like any carbohydrates, and it's the best I've felt in my entire life. Which I mean, it kind of concerns me why how that's the common advice. Yet I feel so much better without them. But anyways, I'm here today to tell you that you don't need to eat carbohydrates to get energy. And I want to share with you how I get energy without carbohydrates. An abundant, consistent, just the best I've ever felt type of energy. So if you don't know me, my name is Keegan, and I talk about like diet and fitness and stuff. So if that sounds interesting to you, then you should go subscribe and that sort of thing. Anyways, this is how I get energy without carbohydrates. And the first thing that I just want to talk about is that the carbohydrate like metabolism thing, right? That carbs are your only source of energy it's not the whole picture. Like, yeah, we can burn carbohydrates and stuff, but we can get other forms of energy that are probably better for us. So the thing that we're taught in like high school, like basic high school biology, like this is literally what I've taught. Like I'm 17. This is the thing that I was taught like 2 years ago, my sophomore year. I'm a senior now. It's glucose enters the cell. It breaks apart, or I guess sucrose or whatever. No, it's glucose. Glucose breaks apart in the cell. That's called glycolysis. Those things go into the mitochondria. They swirl around in the Krebs cycle, and then electron transport chain energy. Yeah, that's metabolism. That's it. And you're not told anything else. Like there's literally no other context, nothing else like told to you. It's just like, oh yeah, carbohydrates are the only thing. But the thing is like that's only been shown in people who already eat carbohydrates. Like if you stop eating carbohydrates and you instead eat other stuff like just protein and fat, which is what I do now, you actually run on ketones and you run on fat, right? So you become more fat adapted and you end up using less carbohydrates. And so yeah, that's basically what I'm on now. Is I'm on what's called a keto diet, right? So if you don't know about that, like I said, it's just like eating more fat and protein, and you have like very little to no carbohydrates. So you get into the state of ketosis, where you basically produce these things called ketone bodies, and they're your source of energy now, right? Not carbohydrates. And I've found that being in the state of ketosis, my energy is way more consistent. My energy is a lot more abundant, and it's not like whack. It's not inconsistent, and I just feel better in general. And something that I've learned is that with sugar, right? Like so you eat like a carbohydrate rich meal and your blood sugar goes up because that stuff is being broken down in your stomach, in your intestine, and it's being absorbed into your bloodstream. So the amount of sugar in your body goes up because at the end of the day, besides like fiber, whenever you break down carbohydrates, it breaks down into glucose molecules, right? Or I guess fructose as well. But it breaks down, it goes into your gut, and then your blood sugar goes up, right? That's just how it works. And then your insulin goes up along with that and crushes it down. But the amount of available stuff, it's up and down. Like the energy level is all over the place. Because if you think of the sugar is kind of like the fuel, right? It's the energy. It's going up and down. It's crashing and spiking and crashing and spiking and crashing. And obviously there's some other things that kind of go up a little bit slower and then fall back down. But it's like a very dramatic rise and then a very dramatic fall. What I found with being in ketosis, again, I shouldn't say again, I don't have like a ketone monitor or whatever, or a blood glucose monitor, so I don't have like graphs to show you. But I think you get what I mean here. It's like you've probably seen like the blood sugar spike after eating like, I don't know, like candy or something, right? Like just the energy spread for me, it's a lot smoother throughout the day. It's just so consistent throughout the entire day. And it's at a higher baseline than it was whenever I was eating carbohydrates on a day-to-day basis. And yeah, I mean, it's just consistent, it's abundant. There's no crashes, higher baseline. It's just way better. for me, I've just found that life is just in general better without eating carbohydrates. There's a couple of drawbacks. One, people think they're kind of like, what? You only eat meat? What? Or they're like, oh, like, why don't you have this thing? Why don't you eat this thing? Why don't you live a little? Like, there's social drawbacks, I guess. But the personal benefits that I've found from that, it's way more worth it. But yeah, I think I covered that. Does that make sense? I hope this makes sense to you. Is like whenever I was eating carbohydrates, my energy was whack. I was getting like sugar highs and then crashing right afterwards. I would have just these periods of like low mood just because I had no energy, because it's just it's just sloth and lethargy. I never felt that great. And it was only whenever I started reducing the amount of carbohydrates that I was eating and I started increasing the amount of fat that I was eating. It was in June of 2023 whenever I first started doing this. And that was honestly the turning point, because up until that point I was eating like max 100 grams of fat a day, maximum, right? I remember, like, I've looked in my logs. I had days where I was eating like 50 grams of fat and like 200 something grams of carbs. Obviously, like, I've always been like one of those gym guys that's like, oh, I need to get in my protein, right? So like protein's fine, but I would always eat like so many carbs, but I would just have like low energy, and it didn't make any sense to me. Because like, and even looking back, it still doesn't make any sense. Like, we're told like, oh, like carbs are your main source of energy, you need to eat carbs to have energy. But I would always feel terrible the more carbs I ate. Like, yeah, I would have like sugar high, like, oh wow. But all drugs have some sort of like high. Like, I mean, crack has some sort of high, but then you crash right down afterwards, right? So it's just a spike and fall thing. And it was only in like June of 2023 when I started reducing the amount of sugar that I ate, the amount of carbs that I ate, and started increasing the fat intake, is whenever I actually started to feel like better. I started to feel like a human, like alive. And it just made me like look back at my life up until that point and think like, what was I doing? And again, in like 2020, yeah, like spring of 2024, whenever I started being a lot more serious about this and cutting out carbohydrates completely, I had again another moment of that. Like, oh crap, I feel amazing now. What have I been doing my entire life up until this point? Being bogged down by brain fog, by just crashes, by inconsistent feeling of like energy and I guess just mood. I don't know. It's a completely different world now, and I'm very grateful that I was willing to experiment with my diet and just try something else, because I feel a lot better now, and I'm grateful that I have. So I would encourage you to try a ketogenic diet. You don't have to go as far like carnivore or whatever. Just try and reduce the amount of carbohydrates that you're eating. Try and reduce the amount of sugar that you're eating. I will warn you though, for the first like 2 weeks, it did feel weird. It did have kind of like weird energy, and you might go through what's called like the keto flu. And I think that's what probably stops a lot of people, is that transition phase, because it takes a little bit for your body to get fat adapted. I'll be completely honest, like it does. Because after you've been so long just like cramming sugar down your mouth, your body, I mean, adapts to that. It's just how it is. But after those 2 weeks, I think you'll feel a lot better than you did even before that transition phase. And that's really what I want to encourage a lot of people to at least get to and try. If you don't like it, then like, okay, fine, right? I would just encourage you to try it out and see how you feel. If you don't like it, like, whatever, bro. Like, that's cool. Um, yeah, it just doesn't work for you then. Like, okay, that's cool. It's worked for me though, and I have a really big feeling that it works for a lot of people. And so I would just encourage you to experiment and see how it goes. So yeah. Anyways, that's all I got. That's how I get energy without carbohydrates. If you like what I'm saying, then you should go subscribe. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Engage on the video. And I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.